Hey everybody. A quick couple notes before starting today's episode. First off, I want to read a new 5-star review I was given on iTunes. It was written by In the Void. In the Void says, engaging, emphatic, and educational. Psychotropic gives a great look into real people's experiences with drugs that stems beyond stoned teenage stories. The individual experiences have a larger takeaway that seems to be lacking in other shows tackling drugs. Dorrit's story and Jonathan's ayahuasca adventures are standout episodes. Thanks a lot, In the Void. That definitely made my day. The second and final thing that I want to touch on before starting today's episode involves the subject matter of today's episode. In today's episode, I had a conversation with another listener who also wrote in a review on Podbean. She went by the name Captain Shrapnel. And in our conversation, we quickly learned that we are both fans of another podcast that is based on drug use. This podcast is called Dopey, the podcast about drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. If you haven't heard this podcast, I highly recommend you go check it out. It is absolutely amazing. We state it in the episode, but I'm going to state it as a preface before. It's awesome. Now, in putting together today's episode, I actually got a hold of Dopey, and I asked if I could use the two main theme songs that they use in their podcast. They use one at the beginning of each episode and another at the end of each episode. Dave, the main host of Dopey, gave his permission, and so that is what you are going to hear today. In fact, both songs that you're going to hear today were written and performed by Dave. The reason I chose to do this is because this episode is largely about Dopey and the events that transpired in Dopey. If you haven't heard, I'm going to give you a quick rundown. Dopey originally consisted of two hosts, Dave and Chris, and they started Dopey and basically shared drug stories and had other people on, and you basically just got insight, almost like a voyeuristic view into their lives. And it was a pretty amazing experience. And then fairly recently, Chris relapsed. He overdosed and he died. This is definitely something that affected me. It affected the subject of today's episode. And I think it's safe to say that it affected a lot of other people. And so today's guest and I talk a lot about this. So if you haven't heard Dopey, hopefully this will be enough context for you to understand what we're talking about. And again, I highly recommend you go see it. So, having said that, go check out Dopey. Go check out their website, www.dopeypodcast.com. And yeah, give it a listen. Let me know what you think. If you like what you hear today, leave a review. Also, if you have anything you'd like to add to this conversation or any other conversation that I've had in previous episodes, feel free to write in at psychotropicpodcast@hotmail.com. Today's episode is actually possible only because the subject of this episode wrote in and expressed their thoughts and ultimately generated dialogue between me and her. And honestly, this is definitely a conversation that I am happy to have had. So, without further ado, I will present today's guest. Psychotropic presents Captain Shrapnel. Hello, is this Captain Shrapnel?
It is.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Good. It's Finally nice to meet you slash hear your voice.
Yeah, you too. I'm still a little sick, so if I sound terrible, I'm sorry.
No, you sound fine. I came down with a small cold yesterday too, so hopefully I don't sound too nasally.
No, you're good. Yeah. Hopefully we can just this will just be the sick episode.
The sick episode. Dude, so how's your day been?
Pretty good. Just normal day. Slept in too late. Got my kid home from school and just cooked some dinner. That's basically all I did today.
Do you have any questions for me before we get started?
No, I was kind of hoping you'd take the lead because I don't do well with just talking.
Okay. When you contacted me, we basically learned that we both have interest in a similar podcast, and that podcast being Dopey, right?
Yes. Yep.
Can you describe that podcast a little bit?
It is basically, if you listen to a little bit and get into the intro, it is a podcast about drugs, addiction, and dumb shit, and that is exactly what it is. It's two dudes talking about their crazy war stories and a little bit of recovery peppered in there, and just, random, all extra dumb shit that they throw in, just whatever's on their mind.
Why were you drawn to that?
The drugs part, to be honest. When I found Dopey, I had just barely gotten into podcasts, period. It was October of 2017 or September. I can't remember exactly, just sometime around then. And my friend told me about, you should try podcasts if you're so sick of listening to music for 12 hours a day. And so I did, and I found Dopey because I was like, oh, this true crime one's good. I wonder if they have a podcast about drugs. And I think at the time, Dopey was the only one that came up in my search that wasn't like a strictly recovery-based podcast. And that's what I was more looking for, is like a funny stories kind of thing. So, yeah, I found Dopey and listened to the first few episodes and fell in love.
What was it that you fell in love with? What did you like about them?
The chemistry between Dave and Chris was really good. The stories, obviously, really, really funny, really crazy shit. I've never done heroin, so it's kind of interesting to see kind of what that's like, and hear about some other crazy stories. I've got my own crazy drug stories, but none of them as good as the ones they've told.
Yeah, they have definitely, especially Chris, has told some pretty amazing stories. I've listened to, I believe, every episode they've released, right? Because there's those lost tapes, or
Yeah.
the lost episodes. And kind of my takeaway from it was Dave, they were both very, very strongly addicted, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like Dave was more into heroin while Chris was more into uppers,
Yeah.
right? But then Chris, he was like, I still had to take heroin in order to stay well. But it definitely, it did seem like Dave was more subdued with his drug use. I almost imagined him kind of holding himself away in his apartment, while Chris liked to go out and get into like really grimy stuff. But then he also had stories about just holding himself up and tripping in his bathroom or whatever. It just seemed like Chris was more willing to put himself in these really weird, awkward situations that often
Yeah.
involved other people.
Yeah. I think my favorite story that Chris told was the one, I don't remember exactly, but the one where he was tripping on acid and looked into his boxers and saw himself or whatever. That one was probably my favorite that Chris told.
I don't remember that one.
Oh my God. I can't remember it exactly, and I can't remember what episode, but it was the funniest shit. I was at work just cracking up and hoping no one got mad that I was being so obnoxious, because he's sitting in his bathroom and he's tripping out and on this weird mental thing, and he's like staring into his boxers. As he comes to, he's like seeing himself, and then he just realizes he's staring at his boxers. Something like that. I can't remember exactly, but I know it was great. They have definitely some of the best crazy stories I've ever heard, and I have heard a ton from everybody, like my own family. So, but Dopey takes the cake for sure.
So you found them, you were looking for drug podcasts, and you were looking for kind of this something that wasn't necessarily recovery centric.
Yeah.
Why did you look up something that was drug centric in the first place?
Nostalgia reasons, because I used to do a lot of drugs when I was younger and didn't have a family to take care of and stuff. So it's kind of like I wanted the drug stories thing as more like a like remind me that there's more in the world than just, get up, go to work, come home, cook dinner, go to bed, like the normal day-to-day everything that is. Like I miss being younger and being crazy and doing crazy shit. And so having a podcast that told drug stories it helps, kind of puts me in a nostalgic mood.
Yeah, for sure. What are you nostalgic for? You're just nostalgic. You're nostalgic for not necessarily like just kind of being free.
Yes, not being I don't want to say this. I love my job, but not being a wage slave and not being, confined to a certain set of regulations on my life. Like, back when I was younger, it wasn't even necessarily about the drugs. The drugs were just there. So it's like that's a big part of it. It reminds me of when I had the freedom to, go out and wander the streets of wherever I was at without worrying about, a babysitter or calling into work or, stuff like that. I miss the freedom, but at the same time, I am very content with the way my life is now. Like, I don't have any desire to go back to doing drugs all the time or, being out in the world and not being with my family. I'm very happy. It's just nice to kind of look back on what once was and I don't know. It makes me feel good.
What drugs did you find yourself doing?
I smoked a lot of weed in the beginning, and I did mushrooms and pain pills occasionally. Nothing too nuts with the pain pills, just occasionally some like Percocet or whatever. And I also did a shitload of acid, and then my drug of choice was ecstasy, and I've done more of that than anyone I know.
Why did you feel like you were drawn to the ecstasy? By the way, was this were you getting like capsuled Molly, or were you getting actual pressed pills, like the old ones with little stamps in them?
God, you're killing me with this, because it's funny, because back in the day, I would get pressed pills, and the quest was always to get Molly. Always. Like, everybody always wanted Molly, but we were getting pressed pills, all colors, all shapes, all prints, whatever. But we could never, ever find Molly. And then as I got older and was, I'd have a free minute or a free weekend or whatever and want to do some ecstasy and have the chance, no one can get pressed pills anymore. It's always just Molly. And it's like, back in the day, all we wanted was Molly, and all we want now is pressed pills. Like,
why were you drawn to that? Why were you drawn to that one in particular and not something like weed or mushrooms? You said you did a lot of acid.
Yeah, I always wanted to try acid because I'd hear stories from my mom about how, oh my God, this one time me and my brother did acid and whatever, and it was so great. And I always wanted to try that. But it's really funny because my mom used to tell me, she's always been really cool, really open. And she's like, if you want to try weed, if you want to try cocaine, like, just don't do meth, don't do heroin, and don't do ecstasy. And I find that hilarious because, I don't know, I used to not think I would ever do ecstasy, because I associated it with the rave scene, which was a lot of who I hung out with, and I didn't really like the music, and I didn't like the attitudes and the way they dressed or any of that. And I associated ecstasy with that, so I never really wanted to do it. I tried it once because it was what was available, and I hated it. And then my ex got me to try it a second time, and then that's when I fell in love with it. And yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting thing. You say that the first time you did it, you hated it, but then
Yes.
the next time you did it, you fell in love with it.
Yeah.
What was different? Why? How can that happen with a drug?
Well, I took the pill that I bought, despite them telling me to just take half of it. And I'm like, if I paid for the full thing, I'm taking the full thing right now. I don't want to be walking around with this shit in my pocket. So I took the whole thing, and I was hanging out and having a pretty okay time at first, and then I had to go. And the friend that I was with that was going to walk with me back to her house was just trying to make me have a bad time, basically taking weird path home that I'd never seen, and just it was creepy as fuck, like abandoned train tracks, and she's just trying to fuck with me and like put ideas in my head, and I wasn't familiar with what it did at the time, so like I wasn't really hallucinating too much, but like seeing shadows that weren't there a little bit, and she was just fucking with me. And then we get back to her house, and I'm just I don't want people to know that I'm on drugs, so I'm all quiet and just paranoid about it, and people would talk to me and I would just stare at them and ignore them, and most of the time kept my head down because, you know, you don't want people to see that your eyes are dinner plates. And it ended up being just a really bad time. And then I tried it again when I made friends from a new city. They convinced me, my ex, I wasn't dating him at the time, but like I was friends with one of his friends, and he convinced me to buy some because he wanted some. And I was really generous with my drugs back in the day, so I bought everybody some, and we took it, and it was just way better, you know, more relaxed, and I wasn't all worried about it, and it felt a lot better. And then, you know, once I realized I liked it, that's basically where all my money went.
And so that was your drug of choice, was the ecstasy specifically?
Oh, yeah.
You had said that she was trying to put some weird stuff in your head.
Yeah, just like make me paranoid, like there's people watching me, there's, oh my god, everybody at my house is gonna know you're on drugs, like just being a bitch, basically.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Was she was doing it purposefully? She knew what she was doing, or was it just kind of her personality? She wasn't aware that she was actually wigging you out.
She was one of those people. I'm no longer friends with this person, and that's a whole different, complicated story. But this is back when we were like best friends, and she was the type of person that would like fuck with people while they were high, and then just try to pass it off as it being part of her personality. But in reality, she's doing it on purpose, just to see what would happen.
It sounds. I mean, it was a setting difference. It was,
Yeah.
you had a friend that was messing with you versus people who were just more comfortable to be around and more relaxed.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, at the time, those people, the ones that I hung out with and actually liked doing ecstasy with, they weren't really close to me at the time. I think, it sounds stupid, but I dated like everybody in that friend group at some point, but like I don't think when I started doing ecstasy, I was dating any of them. We were all just like hanging out.
Okay. What would you guys do together when you were on ecstasy?
Walk around was a big one. We would play Halo, and my friend had an Xbox, so we play like Halo, and I think he had Dragon Ball Z and stuff, like, and just sit and hang out. It was like me and my ex, and then one other person was my main group, and we did basically everything together. Sometimes we'd just sit in his room and chill, and there was one night we took a bunch of ecstasy at my friend's house, and me and the friend we're all laying in the same bed, just platonic, nothing weird going on, just chilling. And my ex talked for literally 7 hours straight, just telling us his life story down to the last little detail of like what color somebody's shirt was back in 5th grade for 7 hours.
And it was probably insanely interesting.
It was a lot of fun, but we're like nearing the end of the night and me and my friend want to go to bed. We're coming down and we're tired and my ex is still talking and he just out of nowhere, because he's like the whole time he's telling us these stories, he'd be like, hey, you know what's weird? And then he'd just tell us a story, and then at the end he goes, you know what's weird? And I just, in the most like done voice, I'm like, what? And he goes, weird stuff. And that was the end of it. He's like, have I really been talking this whole time? And it's like getting light outside and shit. Oh.
Why do you think you were drawn to that? Like, it sounds like it's a good time, but what is it about that you were seeking?
I have a hard, well, not anymore. I used to have a hard time getting close to people because, you know, I'm weird. I get that. I'm totally just a weird person, and a lot of people don't get that. And so it's kind of hard for me to find true, genuine friends. And so that helped me a lot, especially when it's like, okay, you know, we're really close and we can take this drug together and be even closer and relax. And everybody knew everybody's story and everybody's secrets, and nobody judged anybody for it, even after the fact. It's like we'd sober up and we'd still just tighten it as all hell, like even without drugs. I mean, not anymore. I'm not dating that guy anymore. I'm still friends with the friend that was there, but my ex I haven't talked to in, God, like 2 or 3 years.
Okay. In your email, you had talked about something about you have your own experiences with recovery. Is that correct?
Yeah, kind of. Well, yeah, I would say.
Yeah, would you be able to talk a little bit about this recovery you alluded to?
Yeah, so this is not my proudest moment at all. I mean, it usually isn't with people, but about, oh God, what year is it? 2018, 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I fell back into my partying habits. I mean, I don't want to say battled with alcoholism, but I have bouts of that too. After my younger kid was born, I had postpartum depression and anger issues, I guess, really bad. And to cope with that, I was drunk all the time, like constantly. I still held down a job, still took care of my kids. Everything was good, but I would pawn my kids off on my mom usually, or my dad, or just whoever would take them so that I could have time to be drinking 100 proof schnapps and getting blacked out. So like there was that, and I got over that. And I was in a relationship at that time with an abusive asshole that wouldn't work and blamed me for everything. And it was terrible. And, you know, I shouldn't blame that for me drinking, but that contributed a lot to me wanting to drink. And I finally broke it off with him. And the next year I got back in touch with an old friend who found this guy. She was like living with him, I think, and he was an ecstasy dealer, like pure MDMA by the gram, however much you needed. And I got my tax return back that year, about $7,500. So I paid off my debt, all my debt, and had probably $6,000 left. And over the course of a month and a half, I spent all of that on ecstasy and just binged hardcore. I would just give my kids to my mom and just go nuts. I would disappear and go up north to where the guy I was with at the time lived, up in Ogden, which is about 50 miles north of Salt Lake. And I'd go up there every weekend. It was horrible. And I feel like such a shitty mom for what I did, but I always did make sure my kids were in a safe place. I can say that for myself. I am a dumbass, but I'm responsible about it when it happens. They were fine, they were taken care of, but it got to the point where I was out of money, I was broke. I had just recently started working at the job I'm at now when this was happening, and I was calling in sick to work, and it got really out of control. And I found out later in the year after I had stopped, I quit cold turkey. Like, just one day, ran out of drugs, ran out of money, and said, fuck it, I'm done. I'm going to just try to get my shit together. And I found out that my mom was trying to get my kids taken from me by the state. Like, she was going to put that into motion. And that was really what lit a fire under my ass to get, like, out of it. So that's pretty much the gist of it. I mean...
So was this you didn't seek any help necessarily, or?
No, I realized that what I was doing was terrible and I needed to stop. I didn't ask for help. I didn't go to AA or NA. I didn't do anything. I ran out of drugs and ran out of money and said, okay, this stops now. And it did. And it was hard for a while. And I kind of replaced the ecstasy with alcohol, but not as frequently, because I was to a point where I was rolling every night. I would come home from work and wait for my kids to go to bed and immediately just go take some, and lose the rest of the night and be up till 5 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
Yep, every day. It was really bad, and I look back on it and I am definitely ashamed.
So going back to Dopey, you were drawn to them because of nostalgia reasons. Basically, you were nostalgic for these earlier days where you felt more free, and you associated that freedom involved drug taking, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And you've listened to Dopey all the way through.
Yes.
How do you feel about Chris and his overdose? And like, they were providing this nostalgic sort of content. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, with Chris's overdose, it's one of those things because, you start from the beginning of Dopey, and they're just, from the first episode, the chemistry is just amazing. And you get through up until, I can't remember exactly what episode, but it's continual. The chemistry is always good. And then Chris dies. And then it was so sad because even though it's just a podcast and Dave and Chris never knew me, I don't know them personally, but I feel like I do because they've been having a chat in my ear for the past, year and a couple of months. So I feel like I have gotten to know them a lot. So when Chris died, it was devastating and I cried, and I actually didn't believe it at first. I thought that sounds fucked up, but I was like, this has got to be a joke because there's no way. And then, Chris died, and then you listen to the last couple episodes before he did, and he sounds off, but at the same time, he didn't sound high to me. He just seemed tired. Like, I wouldn't have guessed that he was using again. And it's really sad, and I feel so bad that Dave had to lose him, especially so soon after losing his other best friend to the same thing. It is so terribly tragic. And I still get sad about it. Like, this is so dumb. I was listening to an audiobook recently, and the narrator had a Boston accent, and she said room the way that Dave would always give Chris shit for saying it, and it cracked me up and then made me sad because Chris isn't here anymore.
Yeah, for sure. But I guess what I'm kind of getting at is Chris was a drug addict, and he was able to get sober. But then what happened was they started a podcast together. They started Dopey, and Dopey is about drugs, addiction, and dumb shit, right?
Yeah.
And I guess I wonder if by having that podcast and reliving those stories, they cast a positive light on drug use, and they keep it that much more accessible for themselves. This is all speculation on my part. And I should have prefaced this by saying that I think Dopey is an absolutely amazing podcast, and I am so glad I got to experience it. But that was one of the issues that they kind of touched on in some of the earlier episodes. Like they had some of their, I want to say some of their sponsors or some of the people they were surrounded with in AA, they did not agree with the podcast that they were doing.
Yeah.
And I could see that disagreement involving what I'm talking about right now. Right?
Yeah.
I can just see. So this type of stuff, we're kind of touching on a taboo subject. We're touching on drug use, and people can overdose, and it's illegal. And even though some people believe that drugs shouldn't be demonized or made illegal, made inaccessible, there's still a reason for it, because it kind of has a way of getting people carried away. Addiction can be the act of somebody not being able to control themselves anymore. And so, the idea is to keep people away from drugs or keep drugs away from people. But then there's people like, there's podcasts, or there's people like Dave and Chris, and then myself, who generate content that is drug related. And in many ways, oftentimes that drug related content can be viewed as romanticizing drug use. And I just wonder what the moral or ethical implications are of doing that.
I don't sorry. I don't feel like you can't blame a podcast or a TV show or anything like that for, you could say, yeah, it romanticizes drug use or whatever, but you can't blame it for someone going out and doing drugs the same way you can't blame violent video games for violent crime. It falls down to I guess in the podcast case, the listener. If the idea is already in their head that they're going to do drugs, they're going to do them whether there's a podcast about it or not. And like Dopey, yeah, they told crazy drug stories and stuff, but they're also, both Dave and Chris are recovering addicts. They got out of it, and they are using their past to make a difference on other people, because it really bothers me that people would talk shit or have a problem with them, quote unquote, romanticizing drug use, because the Dopey Nation people, they have taken a lot from Dopey that's positive, like people that call in and they're struggling, and Dave, or when Chris was around, Chris would talk to them and help them to stay clean. Like, it's a different approach to helping people. It's not, the traditional abstain from even thinking about what you used to do kind of thing. It's like, we were drug addicts and we did some crazy shit and we can laugh about it now, but we're clean now and everything's good. Like, it's not, yeah. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there.
No, and I think I do understand what you're saying. I think that in the end, at least for me, it's a really fine line, because on one hand, one of the things that I think Dopey did, and I think they may have mentioned this, was that they initially, in my mind, they did turn more recovery centric, right? And so they actually kind of crossed this line from not being not being a recovery type podcast to being more of a recovery type podcast. And in light of what happened with Chris's death, I can completely understand how it went that way, you know? And then also them just when Chris was alive, I'm sure they reflected on, what are we doing? You know, maybe we should have more of a positive message, because I think what they did really well was they created something that it wasn't preachy about recovery. What it did was it showed people who may still be struggling that there were other people who had struggled and were now sober that were still having a good time.
Yeah.
Right?
Like David said a bunch of times that he wants to Dopey was them having fun sober, and he wants sobriety to be fun, and it is, and I love that. Like I really do.
Yes, yeah. And honestly, that's one of the things that he said that's my favorite from the things that he said. However, the flip side to this is, I imagine like this hypothetical situation where you have two parallel universes. In one universe, you have a kid sitting in a classroom and he is being shown faces of meth. Have you heard of that?
Yes, I have.
Would you be able to describe that?
Well, kinda. I mean, it's basically, from what I remember, I think they use mug shots, and it's like people around not their first arrest, or maybe it is their first arrest or whatever, and then they show them later on after however long of meth use, and it shows the difference in how they look, and their face is all scarred and shitty looking, and they look terrible. That's what you're talking about, right? Is that?
Yes, they look insanely older. They're a lot more miserable looking, a lot more just pale and just bleak, just super drawn out. There is a huge difference, and this is faces of meth, right? And so you have this kid in a classroom who's being shown faces of meth. And then in this other universe, you have the same kid. Maybe he's not in a classroom. I can't imagine like a scenario where they're going to be playing Dopey in the classroom. Right?
Sounds like my kind of classroom, though. Right?
But how about this? Let's think about. Let's say that they're playing Dopey in this classroom, and it's the same kid, and it's Chris talking about one of his meth experiences, one of the real funny stories. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which kid is more likely to use meth?
Probably the one listening to Chris talk about how funny his meth experience was.
So that's what's in my mind, and I feel like that's where this line, that kind of portrays how fine this line is. On one hand, they're helping people who are using by just giving them this like tiny bit of hope, almost subliminal, you know, by saying like there can be life beyond this, you know, and there are people who worked through this. You think you're a bad drug user? Check out this story. You weren't anywhere near what we were, right? But then on the other hand, they, in my mind, I mean, I'll use the word, they romanticize drug use. And honestly, like other podcasts that talk about drugs, like mine, it romanticizes drug use. And again, this is all in my mind. This is all totally up for debate. If you don't agree with it, like that's totally fine. But it is kind of a scary notion.
Well, yeah, I do agree, but I don't know. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't ever want my kids to do like meth or heroin or any of the big scary shit, but it's like I saw this shirt on Facebook and it says say perhaps to drugs, because it's like I would never be like, oh my god, you should totally just go out and see what meth is like. But at the same time, I don't really have a problem with drug use so long as it's under control and like not addiction level, you know, hard drugs. But so yeah, romanticizing drug use isn't always maybe a good thing, but it's also good to get a more honest perspective on it, because in like my ninth grade health class or whatever, they are talking about how LSD does all this crazy shit to you, like side effects that are just so out of control. And I'm like, I have never experienced any of that. Same with weed. Weed was the big one that I was just like, are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. They sit there and tell you that it's the worst thing ever. If you smoke one time, you're going to get addicted to meth immediately. You know, like just making it over dramatic. And it's not good to, like, I don't know, push drugs into a like super positive, oh my god, you should definitely do this kind of light, but it's also not good to lie to prevent people from doing it. You know, I think it's best to have that balance of, oh yeah, this funny story, but I also ruined my life because of it.
And you think that Dopey was doing that?
Yeah, like both sides of it. Telling the good, funny stories that, yeah, it romanticizes drug use a little bit, but it's like there's this, and then there's always that little bit of, this fucked my life up because I was doing this, and I was a terrible person back then, and I hurt people, and don't be like this. Don't do this. It's funny to laugh about it now, but it's not when you're right in the middle of it, you know?
That's awesome. Dude.
Yeah.
I want to take a walk around the world. I wonder would it do me any good? Until I get some money in my pocket, then I guess I'll just have to walk around my neighborhood. But I want to be good so bad. Want to be so good, so bad, so bad. I want to be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. And I want to take a ride up in the sky. Watch as aeroplanes just pass me by. And I want to see a Lear jetliner take a dive, just to show all of these people what it means to be alive. But I want to be good so bad. Want to be so good, so bad, so bad. I want to be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. And my shadow's getting smaller and smaller. And it's time to where I stand. Shadow's getting smaller and smaller. And it's time to where I stand. And I wonder would they pay it any mind when I leave this busted city far behind. I'll take the high road, however far it winds, because peace and love are very, very, very hard to find. And I want to be good so bad. Want to be good so bad, so bad. I want to be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. Damn it, all these suckers make me mad. And it's all I ever had. And it's all I ever had. And these suckers make me mad, and I want to call my dad. And it's all I ever had. 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 And these suckers make me mad, and it's all I ever had. And I want to